Welcome to another astrology podcast. In this podcast, I'd like to talk about the sun sign, the sun in astrology. And so the podcast is titled In Search of the Emperor's Clothes. Now, that is related to the fact that the sun is a kind of kingship or queenship in your natal chart, and that euphemism is connected to the fact that the sun acts as the central organizer of the natal chart. Now, there are the three most important aspects of a natal chart are the ascendant, which I consider to be the most important, followed by the sun, and then the moon. These are the so-called big three. But in my view, and in my experience, the ascendant has to be the standout point. Why? Because it is the context for the placement of the sun and the moon. Now, the sun and the moon, their placements are not really unique to individuals per se, because a lot of people are born with the sun at a certain degree, and that cannot account for the differences that individuals have. The ascendant point is a point that changes the ascendant sign is a point that changes every 2 hours. So the sign changes every 2 hours, meaning you can divide a sign into equivalent 15-degree sections, and each 15-degree corresponds to 1 hour. So in that way, you can easily say that each degree on the ascendant lasts only 4 minutes. And so every 4 minutes, the ascendant degree changes. And this is more sensible in delineating the uniqueness of individual characteristics, personality characteristics, that is. And so in terms of our individuality and uniqueness, the ascendant holds sway. But in terms of the ability to organize the chart, the natal chart, and all the bodies and energies within the natal chart, then the sun becomes the organizing principle. And it is that which I'm going to talk about in this podcast. Now, I am going to be reading from an article I wrote some time ago in 2018. And I hope you enjoy it. Intermittently, I will stop reading from the article and introduce commentaries. I will indicate when I do that. So here goes. In search of the emperor's clothes. If I had $1 for every time someone asked me my sun sign, with a view to explaining what they may have just observed regarding my behavior, I'd be rich. No, I'd be very rich. And I'm sure the same applies for every one of you into astrology out there. Why is everyone so obsessed with their sun sign? Although, if we place the question within its proper context, it becomes easy to imagine how all may be forgiven. Astrology today is perceived as pseudoscience by formal academia and mainstream media. This is normal, considering that we no longer have great citadels of learning dedicated to the study of various aspects of astrology, comparable to what we have regarding the study of other aspects of our natural world, which are deemed more useful to the production of technology. Within this context, astrology, arguably the oldest organized endeavor of the human mind, has been relegated to the funny section of daily newspapers, somewhere between the sports listing of the day and the comic strips. Pressed for space, publishers could spare just a short section for astrology, just enough space apportioned to generate attention as some whimsical curiosity designed to entertain a few, like a vestige organ from a long-forgotten era of mankind. These astrological columns are therefore written in such manner as to pack some attention punch, and nothing packs quite a punch for attention like the sun. Astronomically, the sun is the largest body in the solar system, with a diameter 109 times that of the Earth, and a mass 330,000 times that of our planet. With its huge mass and diameter, the other planets are dragged in tandem with the Sun in its motion around the Milky Way galaxy. It is thought that the Sun and the solar system were formed from the remnants of a gaseous nebula, which was itself created billions of years before then from a dead and exploded star. The Sun is a humongous source of nuclear energy generated from the fusion of lighter elements such as hydrogen into heavier ones such as carbon, thus bathing our planet in radiation essential to all life on Earth. All naturally occurring heavy elements we find on Earth were forged in the heart of the dead and exploded star, whose death paved the way for the creation of our solar system. From the uranium we use in our nuclear reactors to the carbon in our bodies, all came from this dead star. But the Sun is not the only driver of life on Earth. Scientists were baffled when they discovered complex life and ecosystems in deep sea vents on Earth where the Sun's radiation does not penetrate. This was a thriving ecosystem of complex multicellular life forms, plant and animal, getting their sustenance and energy from the heat and mineral nutrients spewing out of molten lava. This proved finally that life is not solely dependent on the Sun, but primarily on water and an active energy source. It is still unclear how these life forms differ from those exposed to the Sun. My thoughts on this follow. Psychologically and astrologically, the Sun is the ascendant's point of maximal attention when it chooses to organize its focus, that is, the ascendant being the totality of the psyche. It is the highest level of awareness an ascendant is capable of pulling together when it needs to bring the full power of its consciousness to bear on a point. But the Sun needs something to focus on, something to be attentive to. As coordinator of the solar system, the Sun is the orchestrator of the psyche today. This was not always so. In our distant hominid past, the moon was the purveyor of our consciousness, as it still is with most animals and plants today. The solar mind is a recent development, evolutionary speaking. And ever since we developed it, we have made astonishing strides in our levels of self-consciousness. The Sun triggered our unique type of self-awareness by enabling our primitive psyche to quieten itself long enough to separate from itself. What the Sun did to our developing psyche was to form a center of attention in such a way as to drown out the sense of awareness from all the other planets in the solar system. Freed from this background distraction, our psyche was able to focus awareness long enough to observe its independent nature from all other things. This process gave rise to our awareness of self and what we refer to today as the phenomenon of being conscious. The Sun's association with royalty stems from ancient sun cults, who viewed the power of the Sun's heat and light to drive and dominate all life on Earth as equivalent to the power of an omnipotent ruler. Thus, the King Archetype of the Sun is related to the central role it plays in the sustenance of life on Earth. This archetype was reinforced when astronomical observations from the 3rd to the 16th centuries placed the Sun at the center of the solar system. There have been many notable sun myths throughout human history. However, one of the most studied is the sun myth system of ancient Kemet, today's Egypt. In this myth, the sun demigod was referred to as Ra. He was considered to have created all forms of life, including mankind. In this system of thought, earthly royalty was an incarnation of the Sun on Earth, and death was an opportunity for such royalty to be transformed into a star. To this day, the concept of royalty has a close association with the Sun. Astrologically, the Sun is said to rule strength, vigor, vitality, ardor, generosity, and the ability to function as a mature individual and a creative force. It is also said to indicate the complete potential of every human being. Just as the Sun shines its light on the Moon, so does our solar consciousness pass on its discoveries to the lunar unconscious by entraining it over a long period of time. The reason for this being that the energy needed to draw the solar mind to a focus, such as what happens when we concentrate, is tasking. When we concentrate our faculties, we open the way for reasoning, planning, organization, and all those traits we associate with being human today. It is the solar mind that enables us to gather all aspects of our being into a solid beam of thought, As such, the planet Mercury, known astrologically for its representation of mental faculty, is never more than a few degrees from the Sun. There may be more Sun-Mercury conjunctions in natal charts than there are other types of solar conjunctions, as viewed from the Earth, that is. It is therefore unreasonable to discuss the effects of the Sun within the natal chart without understanding the role Mercury plays in the process. As such, in the natal chart, the placement of the Sun and the placement of Mercury must be interpreted together. In this role, the Sun is the coordinator of the entirety of the programming that is reflected in our natal chart. Its placement determines our ability and propensity to focus the solar mind and where that focus and attention is most needed. It is easy to see why the Sun's influence in the chart has been given so much emphasis. It is because the Sun, as the center of attention, has constructed the solar mind, or what we prefer to call the I or ego. This construct is responsible for the feeling of individuation which we have, for the separateness which we feel, and the possibility for isolation when things begin to go wrong. The I, which is a pure fantasy of the solar mind, is a projection of the holographic center of attention, which enabled the calming of the other planetary energies within the psyche, and which subsequently allowed for our ability to develop and conceptualize the idea of a motive. By so doing, the solar mind convinces us that there is a separate being within us which acts. The magnificence of this creation cannot be overemphasized. As long as the I exists and is strong, the other planetary energies are quietened and held at bay. A weakened and severely debilitated sense of I allows the other planetary energies to run amok within the psyche, leading to a disorganized disposition, the inability to plan, to organize, and generally to forge a motive. This dissolution or strangulation of the I, determined by the disposition of the Sun in the natal chart, is one reason for mental deterioration, depression, decreased vitality, compromised libido, and a general lack of faith in life. It is the psyche's way of projecting this debilitated Sun's position into the world, crying out for resolution. Resolution comes from the reconstruction of a sense of self by artificially reversing the effects of the debilitated placements, which are prescribed by the Sun's constitution in the natal chart, culminating with the creation of an external center of attention required for the psyche to find its way back to the Sun. It is for this reason that the Latin word for the Sun is used to describe this sense of I. The Latin word for the Sun is Sol, or as we call it today, soul. This reconstitution of the soul is the main reason behind the doctrine of Christianity. It is for this purpose that Christianity is viewed principally as a religion of the Sun. The ancient Sun cult cities practiced solar reconstitutions for their royals because the motive of humankind, like the focus of the Sun, is the power to govern all unchallenged. When we look around the world today, what we witness is the undoubted power of the Sun as manifested by the will and motive of humankind over his environment. Exercising the solar mind comes at a cost to our physiology. It is why we sleep. Personalities with a strong solar focus on the angles of their natal chart need more sleep than most. It is during sleep that the sense of I is dissolved and reconstituted naturally. Faculty degradation occurs when this process is stymied. Naturally, those personality types with a strong sense of I often come across as willful, self-absorbed, proud, dignified, generous, magnanimous, and lofty. Those with a weak sense of I exhibit the opposite of these qualities. It must be remembered, though, the Sun's focus is simply a construct. Hence, care must be taken to nurture and manage the healthy development of the solar focus in the young ascendant. A strong solar focus anywhere on the natal chart is the key to an ascendant's sense of fulfillment. It serves as a barrier for the psyche, protecting it from unwanted and unfocused planetary energies. Strong transits or progressions from the outer planets, especially Pluto, are designed to test and break down inauthentic constructions of the solar mind, so that rebuilding on a surer footing can occur. During these transits or progressions, people often describe the experience as having lost their souls or sense of meaning and purpose in their lives. Humanity is currently relearning everything it once knew about its solar mind. So that is the end of the article itself. Now, what I'm going to do next is to talk about the placement of the sun in the signs and what these actually mean. But I'm going to go about it from a different point of view, because remember, the quality of the sun in astrology that makes it stand out is its ability to organize and bring together to a central point a motive. And so, every sun sign is the nature of that motive as presented by the sign itself. So, for instance, when the sun finds itself in Aries, the nature of the sun in that sign is to bring all the faculties of Aries to a singular point. And so the qualities of Aries, like we would describe them as directness, uh, strength, brashness, impatience, intolerance, uh, you know, and all other qualities that you can associate with Aries. Now, the sun in Aries brings all of that to a singular point in the natal chart, so that whenever Aries tries to focus on an objective, these behavior types or behavioral patterns are brought to a single point. Implies that Aries, when the sun is found in Aries, the tendency is towards the desire to be what it wants to be, whatever it wants to be, and there is no general plan or format regarding what it wants to be. All it knows that it is always trying to be something, and so that is the essential energy that Aries, that dominates the sun in Aries. It wants to pioneer into something new, and it wants to do so in a very forthright and direct way. But this energy of becoming is very unstable, and so Aries is very changeable from day to day. It is the energy of force to change its direction at whim. And that is the essential dynamic. And so when this sun finds itself in Aries, depending on the house that it is, its job there is to find something to fertilize that energy, meaning it needs to find the earth sign to pour that energy into so as to become something, to become a material thing. Because Aries on its own is completely immaterial, it is totally idealistic. And so Aries is always looking towards Taurus or the second house or Venus in order to conceptualize a union and fertilize something. It must also be said that Aries is a fire sign, just like Leo and Sagittarius, and the difference between the fire signs lies in the level of intensity, focused intensity. Now, the tendency is towards the broadening of this focus from an impulse point in Aries to a sweeping broad generalization in Sagittarius. But the idea is the same. These are signs that deal with the ideation of the ego, the creativity of the ego. So it is within the fire signs that ego is first sparked. But ego by itself cannot do anything. It must fertilize something. It must go into something. And usually what it goes into is the earth, the preceding earth sign. So the container for the fertilization of Aries is in Taurus. The container for the fertilization of Leo is in Virgo. And the container for the fertilization of Sagittarius is in Capricorn. And so these signs work as dyadic dynamics. Okay? And that's how the sun manifests. So when the sun finds itself in Aries, it is a potential. That's all it is. It's a potential lacking direction. So it is not a vector per se, because Aries doesn't really have a direction. It just wants to be. But what it wants to be is undefined. And that is why sun sign Aries, they're very changeable, even though they're not mutable signs. But they're very changeable in the sense that they cannot, that desire, the will of the ego, keeps changing from minute to minute. They may want something today and something else entirely the next day. And this is just how they are. When the sun is in Taurus, the overriding impulse of the sun, the overriding focus, is to bring to material reality an ideation of the ego. And in this case, the ego is in Aries. So it is to establish a concrete body on earth from the world of ideas or from the world of the desire of the ego down into material reality. And so when the sun finds itself in Taurus, this is what its focus is all about. And that is why Taurus is focused on carving out a pleasurable place for itself in the world. And once it does that, once it finds that, then it doesn't move anymore. It considers its objective fulfilled. And so the way to interpret the presence of the sun in any sign is to take those essential understandings of that sign and to see how these can be brought to a singular point, to a singular focus, because that is what the sun does. And that is why the glyph for the representation of the sun is a circle with a dot in the middle. That dot is the central focus, which is the behavior of the sun in the solar system. And you can see that the sun has very far-reaching influence into the solar system, as all these bodies in the solar system all revolve around the sun. So that in that manner, the sun is the what? Is the organizing principle of the solar system. That's really what it is. And so when you take this any sign, for instance, in Pisces, the sun struggles. Why? Because the essential nature of Pisces is towards dissolution of the ego. Because Pisces is the end of the zodiac. So it is where ego goes to end. And it is not an abrupt end per se, but it is a dissolution, a spreading out of ego towards all corners of existence. But what the sun wants to do is to bring all dissolution, to gather it up into a single point, a single motive. And so the sun and Pisces are really at odds with each other. Now, in my view, the interpretation of the sun in Pisces is a connection, a motive that is broken down into billions of different pieces, such that the energy is not gathered to one person, but rather is spread out across the entire spectrum of the human race. So when your sun is in Pisces, you have this overriding need and desire to give of yourself selflessly without any motive to everyone. That's really what it is. Because that is the only way the sun can find meaning in Pisces. If it tries to do otherwise, it finds itself like standing in quicksand. It gets very super frustrated because it cannot really focus on anything. It cannot really be anything per se, because that is not a task when it comes to the ending of the zodiac. Rather, it is a dissolution. And one practical way to handle such a desire is to sublimate that desire towards the unconscious masses of people. So volunteer work, helping people selflessly, not just a group, but a wide range, what I call the faceless masses. And it could also be, since Mercury is always connected to the sun, it could be that this desire is a communicative desire. So you find elements of broadcasting to the masses, somehow reaching the masses in this Sun Pisces configuration. So that's really what it is. I'm not going to go individually sun sign, sun in the signs. No, there is no need. There's so much literature out there. Okay, but the essential thing with the sun is it tries to bring things to a point, to a focal point, because it is the nature of self-awareness. And when the sun finds itself in Leo, this is like a match made in heaven, because Leo is already the centralization of motive, of will. And so when the sun finds itself in Leo, that's a double dose, meaning the emphasis is on creativity, the desire of the ego to create, the will of the ego to bring into manifestation a realization. That's it. And this is the source of their joy. This is the only thing that brings a light to them, is the fact that their will can bring about outcomes. And that's it. Don't forget to like, subscribe if you have loved listening to this podcast. Thank you.